You've probably seen a t-shirt, or maybe some sneakers, with a big claim about its carbon footprint. Brands make these promises all the time, right? But what do they actually mean? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on what it really takes to measure a product's entire life story.
It's a great marketing term, isn't it? Full carbon footprint. It just sounds so complete, so transparent and responsible. But the truth is, this phrase has a very specific meaning. And well, not all companies measure it the same way. So what should we actually be looking for?
Okay, it all boils down to this one major difference. A lot of brands only measure from cradle to gate. That means they only count the environmental impact up until the product leaves the factory. But a truly transparent assessment is cradle to grave. That accounts for the entire journey from how it's made to how you use it and finally where it ends up. That's the full story we're going to unpack. So let's start at the very beginning. Stage 1, the cradle. This is where the raw materials for our t-shirt actually come from, long before a factory is even in the picture. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because the starting points can be wildly different. If our t-shirt is made of cotton, its cradle is a farm. That means we have to measure the impact of fertilizers, pesticides, and the incredible amount of water it takes to grow the plants. But what if it's polyester? Well, then its cradle is an oil rig. The impact there comes from drilling for fossil fuels and all the chemical processes needed to create those synthetic fibers. So 2 t-shirts, but 2 totally different origin stories. All right, next up is stage 2, the factory. This is the manufacturing part of the story, and it's often where you see some of the highest industrial emissions. Making a t-shirt isn't just a single step. First, those raw fibers have to be turned into yarn in a super electricity-intensive process called spinning. Then, that yarn gets knitted or woven into fabric. After that comes the most critical step for emissions, we'll get to that in a sec, and finally, the fabric is cut up and sewn together.
And this right here is the absolute key. Step 3, wet processing. That's all the bleaching, dyeing, and finishing, is the single biggest carbon hotspot in the entire factory. So why is that? Well, it takes just enormous amounts of energy to constantly heat up these huge vats of water, and then, of course, to dry all that heavy, wet fabric.
And get this, during the final assembly, when they're cutting out the pattern for the t-shirt, up to 15% of the fabric can be wasted. Just think about that. That's material that was grown, shipped all over the world, spun, woven, and dyed, only to be thrown out as scraps. A true carbon footprint has to include the impact of making that waste too.
Okay, our t-shirt is made. Now for stage 3, the journey. This part covers literally everything that happens from the moment it leaves the factory gate to when it lands on your doorstep. And distribution isn't just one trip. It's a whole chain of events. We have to count the emissions from the factory to a distribution warehouse, and then from that warehouse to the customer. And don't forget the packaging. The carbon footprint of making and getting rid of all those plastic bags, cardboard boxes, and hang tags is absolutely part of this stage.
And how that t-shirt travels makes a huge difference. Flying it across the world is fast, for sure, but it can generate dramatically higher emissions than the slower but much more carbon-efficient option of putting it on a container ship. Now we get to stage 4, the use phase. This is when the product is finally in your hands, in your home. And honestly, this is where the story of our t-shirt's carbon footprint takes a really surprising, kind of counterintuitive turn. Just look at this. For a typical t-shirt, the use phase, which is basically you washing and drying it, can account for over half of its entire lifetime carbon footprint. That's more than the farm, more than the factory, and more than all the shipping combined. The single biggest impact happens after you've already bought it. It's wild. And this shows you exactly why. The energy needed to heat water for a hot wash and then power a tumble dryer is just immense. But here's the cool part, the empowering part. If you just switch to a cold wash and hang your clothes out to dry, you can slash this stage's impact. Your choices as a consumer really do matter a lot. Finally, we've reached the end of the road. Stage 5, the grave. This is where we have to face the reality of what happens to our t-shirt when it's worn out or stained or we just don't want it anymore. It's a simple question, right? But the answer is pretty sobering. I mean, we all hope our old clothes get a second life through donation or recycling, but what does the data actually tell us about where most of them end up? The reality is, well, it's stark. Globally, the vast majority of our textiles end up right here, in a landfill or an incinerator. And that tiny little sliver, that represents true closed-loop recycling, where old clothes are actually turned into new fibers.
Right now, that number is less than 1%. So there you have it, the full 5-stage journey. From the raw materials in the ground, through manufacturing, distribution, its life with you in your home, and its final disposal. These are the 5 non-negotiable stages that make up a true, transparent, cradle-to-grave assessment.
Knowing all of this, from the farm to your washing machine to the landfill, it really changes how you see things, doesn't it? A product's impact is such a long, complex story. The next time you see a sustainability claim, you won't just see a label, you'll know to ask for the whole story.